here to talk about calculating overtime. Here's the obligatory slide with my picture to let you all know that I'm a real human. That's me, and that's enough of my face so we can get into the meat of the presentation. So there are two basic schemes that govern overtime law. The first one is federal law. So federal law basically states that non-exempt employees have to be paid overtime for all the hours over 40 hours that they work in a work week. And that overtime rate is at 1.5 times their regular rate of pay. And we're going to talk about regular rate of pay in a minute. We've got some examples here at the end. I think we've got 3 slides. But the regular rate of pay in general is an hourly rate based upon all the remuneration paid to the employee in the work week. So the regular rate of is sometimes, but not always, equal to the employee's regular hourly rate. Regular rate calculations can become complicated as more components such as commissions and bonuses are added to the employee's compensation. And we'll dig into that later, like I said. In addition to federal law, we also have to pay attention to state law. So there's a patchwork of state laws that also govern what overtime is at the state level. If state or local law grants greater employee rights or protection than the federal law under the Fair Labor Standards Act, then the state or local law will govern. For example, if a particular city or state requires minimum wage that is higher than the current federal minimum wage, that state or city minimum wage will apply just like it would be for overtime rules. Most states do follow the federal rule of thumb for overtime starting at 40 hours in a week. However, as always with employment law, there are exceptions because that's what we do, it seems. As I just stated, you want to make sure that you follow the most beneficial of either state or federal law. So whichever one benefits the employee more is the one you need to follow. So think of it this way. Federal law is the floor. If state law provides less protection, follow federal law. If state law provides more benefit to the employee, then you follow state law. And you can see just a little smattering of the states that differ from federal law. So Kansas and Minnesota think that you need to work more than 40 hours before you get overtime. So in those states, you would pay at 40 hours under the federal law. There's 3 states off the top of my head that I thought of that pay overtime starting at 8 hours in a day. And so since if you work 9 hours in California, you're going to be entitled to an hour of overtime, but under federal law you wouldn't. You need to follow state law on that one, which is more beneficial to the employee. I think I mentioned on the first slide that non-exempt employees get paid overtime and exempt employees do not get paid overtime. So the exempt employees basically are granted immunity from minimum wage and overtime pay requirements under the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act. There are different calculations for that also at the state level. Some states follow the federal rules in terms of who is exempt and what duties constitute the white collar exemptions or other exemptions. Some states want to be fancy and they add different requirements to who is exempt and who is not exempt in terms of the duties test. So make sure that you also pay attention to state law when you're looking at who is exempt and who doesn't have to get paid overtime. Again, this slide rehashes what we talked about. Overtime is 1.5 regular rate of pay at the federal level, and it includes all the money that you're paid during the work week for work during the work week. Includes wages, salaries, commissions, and non-discretionary bonuses. But an employee's regular rate of pay excludes payments for things other than productive working time. For example, paid time off benefits like vacation or paid sick leave are not included in the regular rate of pay. So if somebody gets paid, works 38 hours in a week and takes 8 hours of vacation, they're not going to get overtime for those 8 hours of vacation, which would give them 6 hours of OT. Non-working time does not count towards the overtime. Also, non-discretionary bonuses are included in the regular rate of pay, and discretionary bonuses are excluded. So a non-discretionary bonus is typically one paid under a prior contract, agreement, or promise. So let's say if my boss said, if you can make 50 widgets in a day, I'll give you extra money. That's going to be an agreement that if I hit this thing, then I will get X, and so that's a non-discretionary bonus. However, if my employer just came around and says, you know what, you're doing a great job, here's an extra 50 bucks. That is a discretionary bonus. That means that the boss or the employer decided within the discretion whether or not to give it. They weren't tied to some previous promise or requirement to give that bonus. Overtime is calculated on a work week basis, and you can't, even if your work week is 2 weeks, your pay period is 2 weeks or monthly or a week and a half, whatever it is, every 15 days, you calculate overtime based upon the work week. So if somebody works 60 hours in 1 week and 20 hours in the second week, you can't say, well, they only worked 80 hours, they don't get overtime. Not true. They get 20 hours of overtime for that first week. So there are some exceptions to that. Some public sector employees, I believe some healthcare fields have some exceptions to that, but based upon the work week, this is where I see a lot of people trip it up. With that, we got about 5-6 minutes left. We're going to jump into our hypotheticals. So this one's pretty easy to start us off with some easy math and with some easy answers. So we got John here who works 10 hours, works for $10 an hour, and he doesn't have any bonuses or commissions or anything like that. This week, John worked 45 hours. So that would be 5 hours of overtime. How much is John entitled for the week? Well, the answer is John gets $475. So the math is laid out right here. His straight time is $450, so $10 an hour times 45 hours equals 450 bucks. And because he has no other compensation included in his regular rate of pay, his hourly rate is exactly the same as his regular rate. So $450 straight time divided by 45 total hours equals $10 an hour regular rate. That math is super easy and super simple. Even I couldn't mess that one up. His overtime compensation is $25. So $10 an hour, which is his regular rate, times 0.5 times 5 hours. So halftime is what that 0.5 is, because we already paid him on that previous slide his straight time for that job. So that's an extra 25 bucks. There's other ways to do it. You could do 40 hours times 10 for his regular rate of pay and get 400, and then take 10 times time and a half times the extra hours, and then you would come up with the extra 2. They both come out to the same answer. This is just the way I prefer to do it. Straight time earnings, remember, they've already been calculated on that previous one, so the amount for each hour overtime is only half of the regular rate of pay. We don't do time and a half because we already included it on the previous slide in the math. So his total pay for the week is 475 bucks, which is 450 straight time plus 25 bucks of halftime, and that's his additional overtime, and you add that up and you get John's total. We're going to move on to hypothetical number 2. Hypothetical number 2 is Ashley. Ashley is a non-exempt sales clerk, which means that she gets paid hourly by Rudy Jewelry. She makes 20 bucks an hour plus commissions. This week, Ashley worked 50 hours and earned 500 bucks in commissions. She also received an annual gift from Ruby Jewelry worth 500 bucks. So this is, we're getting a little more complicated here in terms of scenarios. So remember, if Ashley's commissions are more than 50% of her total compensation, she might be a commissioned retail sales employee. So you would check into that. But for our purposes, she isn't. Ashley's total compensation here is going to be $2,150. Her hourly rate and commissions are included in her regular rate, but the annual gift is not, because that is a discretionary bonus. So total straight times earnings, $1,500, which is her salary, which is $20 an hour times 50 hours, plus $500 commission. So her straight time earnings are $1,500. And her regular rate of pay then is $30 an hour. So her total straight time earnings of $1,500 divided by the hours worked, which is 50, equals $30 an hour. Ashley's OT comp, $150. So $30 an hour times 1/2 times the amount of overtime hours she worked is $150. So broken down right there in the bottom, her total comp is $2,150. $1,000 straight time, $150 for halftime, $500 for commission, and $500 for gift. Again, straight time earnings have already been calculated, so the additional 0.5 might be throwing you off instead of 1.5. On to our final hypothetical here. We're talking about Joe earns a weekly salary of $1,000. Joe and his employer agree that he's supposed to work 40 hours a week. But he's not exempt, so he worked 44 hours this week. How much does he get paid for the week? So just to note, the number of hours of salary is intended to cover can be an agreement between the employer and employee. It doesn't need to be in writing, but if you're not exempt, you still need to be paid overtime for any hours worked over 44 hours a week, or 40 hours a week. So the answer to hypothetical number 3 here is that Joe gets $1,150. His straight time is $1,100, which is his $1,000 weekly salary. His salary is supposed to cover 40 hours a week, which makes his regular rate $25 an hour. 44 hours plus times $25 an hour regular rate would be $1,100 straight time, plus additional base salary plus additional straight time earnings. So yeah, his salary or his straight time would be $1,100. And then his regular rate of pay, again, we already said is $2,500. So he gets overtime in the amount of $50, so $25 an hour times 1/2 times 4 hours. So that's how that math works out. His total compensation for the week is $1,150 again, $1,100 straight time, $50 for halftime for earnings is overtime premiums. That is quick and dirty overtime calculation webinar. We are exactly at 11:15. Thanks all for joining us today. And don't forget about the podcast and the other webinars that Dan told you about at the beginning of this session. Thanks.